First, we look to the biggest story coming out of South Asia, the security situation in Afghanistan. The Taliban has been ramping up violent attacks in the nation as the American troop withdrawal nears its end. While the fight between Afghan forces and the Taliban rages on, it is the people that are bearing the brunt of the violence. The UN assistance mission in Afghanistan says that in the last 3 days, at least 10 people have been killed and 85 wounded in Lashkar Gah, while 5 people were killed and 42 wounded in Kandahar province. Heavy fighting is underway between Afghan forces and Taliban terrorists in the southern province of Helmand, amid fears that its capital, Lashkar Gah, could fall into the hands of the Taliban. Hundreds have fled the region as the Taliban continues its offensive in spite of persistent airstrikes from the US and Afghan forces. Regional reports suggest that the Taliban took control of a major television station in Lashkar Gah. All media broadcasts have been halted in the southern province as clashes intensify in the region. What you see on your screens right now is the current state of control over provinces in Afghanistan. Several areas are under the Taliban's control now, while many other Afghan cities continue trying to push back Taliban advances. Lashkar Gah is a crucial region for the Afghan government, but it is one of the 3 provincial capitals currently under siege. If it falls into the terror group's hands, then it would be the first provincial capital won by the Taliban in the last 5 years, and undeniably a big blow to the Ashraf Ghani government. The Taliban went on the deadly rampage for power following troop withdrawals from Afghanistan, and the Afghan president, Ashraf Ghani, has said that he had warned Washington that the withdrawal would have consequences, and that the reason for Afghanistan's current situation is that the decision was taken abruptly. The US, on the other hand, has said that it is solely the Taliban that is responsible for attacking the Afghans, and that their actions on the ground do not match their leadership's words at the peace negotiations.
Well, there's one party that is, in most cases, responsible for the outrageous and atrocious acts of violence that have been perpetrated against the Afghan people, and that's the Taliban. Of course, other terrorist groups, ISIS-K, also active, but we have seen an increase in these ongoing Taliban attacks. They show little regard for human life, for the rights of the Afghan people, including the basic right of the Afghan people to live in safety and security. The targeted killings, the destructions of buildings, of bridges, other vital infrastructure, other violent acts against the people of Afghanistan, we recognize they are in stark contravention to statements from the Taliban leadership.
The US and UK embassies in Kabul say that the Taliban terrorists may have committed war crimes in southern Afghanistan. They said in Spinboldak, Kandahar, the Taliban massacred dozens of civilians in revenge killings. These murders could constitute war crimes. They must be investigated and those Taliban fighters or commanders responsible held accountable. WION's Anas Malik sent this report from Kabul on the latest developments.
Fighting seems to continue in Afghanistan with 3 major cities which are being hit, which are under the Taliban offensive, and the Afghan forces are trying to push the Taliban back. Now, these 3 cities include the Kandahar city, which is the provincial capital of Kandahar, the Herat city, which is the provincial capital of Herat, and the city of Lashkar Gah, which is the provincial capital of Helmand as well. In Helmand, particularly in Lashkar Gah, in the past 3 days, at least 4 TV stations have closed their operations. 14 radio stations have also closed their operations. The Taliban seem to be in control, except for one district of Lashkar Gah. There are reports that, except for that one particular district one, which also houses the police headquarters, the governor house, the NDS headquarters, the rest is under Taliban control. There are airstrikes which we saw. The Taliban have been putting out images where allegedly a university was bombed by airstrikes, by what they claim was a government airstrike. In Herat, we saw airstrikes which led to Taliban being pushed back, but there is no independent confirmation as yet. Government has said that at least 300 plus Taliban fighters were killed in the past 24 hours, a claim that has been denied by the Afghan Taliban themselves. Anas Malik in Kabul, Afghanistan for WION World is One.
Germany and India will be sending warships to the disputed South China Sea. The development comes as tensions continue to mount with China over Beijing's unilateral claims to vast swathes of territory in the important maritime highway. Germany is sending a warship to the South China Sea for the first time in almost 2 decades, joining other Western nations in expanding its military presence in the region, amid growing alarm over China's territorial ambitions. The frigate WION has set off on its 7-month voyage that will also take it to Australia, Japan, South Korea and Vietnam. The warship is expected to cross the South China Sea in mid-December, making it the first German warship to pass through the region since 2002. Speaking about the Navy ship's deployment, German Defence Minister Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer said, "We want existing law to be respected, sea routes to be freely navigable, open societies to be protected and trade to follow fair rules." Countries including Britain, France, Japan, Australia and New Zealand have also been expanding their activity in the Pacific to counter China's influence. Officials in Berlin have said that the German Navy will stick to common trade routes. The frigate is not expected to sail through the Taiwan Strait either, which has seen regular US Navy activity, which has been condemned by Beijing. Berlin has, however, made it clear the mission serves to stress the fact that Germany does not accept China's territorial claims. China has established military outposts on artificial islands in the waters that contain gas fields and rich fishing, and it overlaps the maritime territories of other nations in the region, including the Philippines and Vietnam. The US Navy regularly conducts so-called freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea, with US vessels often sailing close to the artificial islands and through the Taiwan Strait. Meanwhile, India is also deploying a task force of the Indian Navy's Eastern Fleet in the South China Sea, with the Indian Ministry of Defence saying that the task force will proceed on an overseas deployment to Southeast Asia, the South China Sea and Western Pacific from early August for over 2 months. As chair of the United Nations Security Council for the month of August, India has made freedom of navigation and maritime security one of its key priorities. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will chair a virtual high-level open debate on maritime security on August the 9th.
Maritime security as a concept, as a holistic concept, is being discussed for the first time in the Security Council. And this is something which I have received support from every member of the Security Council. And we genuinely felt that given our own ethos, our own background, that this deserves the attention of the Security Council. As I said, there have been parts of like piracy, for example. That is something where there have been resolutions on piracy. But there are other issues which I just mentioned, which deserve a holistic consideration. Now, I'm very happy to say that I think we are looking forward to a very robust and participation in the meeting. As I said, His Excellency, the President of the Democratic Republic of Congo himself has decided to participate because they are giving a lot of importance to the theme. So I can assure you that the importance which the members of the Council give to this theme is there, very much there. And I'm really hoping that this, I think this engagement which we hope to start will be an engagement which will be constructive. I mean, it is not aimed at anyone. I just wanted to reassure you of that. It is not meant to aim at one member or the other. We may have different views on what is maritime security means for us, but I don't think anyone says that it is not important. So I'm very happy that we are able to host this singularly important event in the Security Council.
There's been a fresh outbreak of highly contagious Delta variant coronavirus cases across multiple Chinese cities. China had brought domestic cases down to virtually zero and allowed life to return largely to normal. But now a new outbreak has thrown that record into jeopardy. China has begun mass testing and issued stay-at-home orders in various cities, including its capital, Beijing.
Nearly 20 months after coronavirus was first detected, the city where the pandemic first hit, Wuhan, has recorded new cases. 7 new COVID-19 infections have been reported after over a full year of lull in local cases. And to avoid a repeat of the 2020 catastrophe, the authorities will test the city's entire population for COVID-19, which means 11 million residents of Wuhan will undergo comprehensive nucleic acid testing. The Delta variant has reached dozens of Chinese cities. This after infections among airport cleaners in Nanjiang sparked a chain of cases that have been reported across the country.
First, this outbreak is caused by the imported Delta variant. This Delta variant has a high viral load, is highly contagious, spreads with a high speed and has a long recovery time. Second, the timing is relatively special. It happened in the mid-summer ahead of the summer break, when tourists gather in scenic spots. Third, it happened at an international airport with dense population and relatively high circulation of people. Because of these three characteristics, the outbreak has now spread to other cities in the province or outside the province, and there is still a risk of continued spread to other regions in the short term.
Authorities in various cities have put strict measures in place, including confining residents of entire cities to their homes, cutting off domestic transport links, and mass testing. Major cities including capital Beijing have tested millions of residents and cordoned off residential compounds. Beijing has also blocked tourists from entering during peak summer holiday travel season. Popular holiday destination of Zhangjiajie in central China's Hunan province has barred residents from leaving the city. More than 1.3 million residents of the eastern city of Yangzhou have been confined to their homes. Each household is allowed to send only one person outside per day to shop for necessities. This is the largest outbreak that China has witnessed in months. The spread of the Delta variant sparked 60 local cases on August 3rd. Previously, China had boasted of its success in bringing domestic cases down to virtually zero, but the latest outbreak is threatening that success with more than 400 domestic cases reported since mid-July. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Vitali Shishov, an activist in exile and the head of an organisation that helped Belarusians flee abroad, has been found dead in a park in Ukraine's capital, Kiev. The Ukrainian police have opened a murder probe over the death and said that they would pursue all leads, including a possible murder disguised as a suicide. Shishov is the leader of a Kiev-based non-profit group and was reported missing by his partner on Monday after he did not return from his morning run. Meanwhile, a Belarusian NGO has alleged President Alexander Lukashenko is responsible for the death. The Belarusian House in Ukraine released a statement that read, "There is no doubt that this is an operation planned by Chekists to liquidate a Belarusian who presented a true danger to the regime." In tweets earlier, the Belarusian activist's friends had mentioned about Shishov being followed on his run for the last few days. The Ukraine, along with Poland and Lithuania, are considered safe havens for Belarusians fleeing persecution. A violent crackdown in the country took place after Lukashenko's opponents disputed the results of elections that took place last year. The decision for Israel's closely watched Sheikh Jarrah case has been delayed, with the Supreme Court proposing a compromise to end the long legal fight. The Palestinians have rejected the offer, however. The top court suggested that 4 Palestinian families living in Sheikh Jarrah could stay in their homes if they recognise the land was owned by an Israeli company. The decision is extremely crucial because the violence in Gaza has its origin in this neighbourhood.
We are asking the court to recognize the ownership rights of the families, of the Palestinian families, as was granted by the Jordanian. We heard from the other side, and from the court, you have to take into consideration that there is special Israeli legislation and there are Israeli precedents regarding this property, recognizing the Jewish ownership, and you could be only tenants. We oppose that.
The area has been at the centre of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The neighbourhood is populated by 300 Palestinians residing in 14 houses, but a legal challenge in the Israeli Supreme Court is seeking to evict 4 of those families and bring in Israeli settlers. Under the court's plan, the Palestinians would remain as protected tenants who cannot be evicted for the foreseeable future. According to Israeli media reports, the compromise would allow the Palestinian families to continue living in the homes for another 20 years, during which they will have to pay some rent to the Jewish trusts, which are said to have owned the land before Israel's establishment in 1948. The offer has been rejected by Palestinian families. Israel occupied East Jerusalem in 1967. Hundreds of Palestinians were driven out of their homes. Many of them found refuge in Sheikh Jarrah. Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh are continuing to experience trauma. After housing camps were gutted by a huge fire earlier this year, now massive floods and landslides are sweeping through. Houses are floating away and half a dozen refugees are feared dead, but those living there are left with no option but to pick up the pieces and carry on.
For the Rohingya refugees in Cox's Bazar, the monsoon was a spell of disaster. Heavy rains flooded the refugee camp. Muddy water devoured the shanties. At least 6 Rohingya, including 3 children, lost their lives. For the survivors, this story is all too familiar. Another tragedy to recover from. Roads have turned into rivers. Occasionally you see children swimming through. The scale of this disaster is lost on them. Elsewhere, people are frantically trying to drain the water, albeit with little success.
When the water came into my house, there was nobody from my family at home to help. I was alone, but I could take my belongings to a safer place. Now I'm living and staying with another family in the camp.
200,000 refugees are stranded at this camp. Thousands have been relocated to temporary settlements. For them, it's become an unfortunate precedent. Earlier this year, a deadly fire gutted the same camp. The refugees were still recovering from the blaze when the floods arrived.
I feel like going away from here. I will be at peace if I can be transferred somewhere else. I'm worried that my children will die in their sleep one day and I won't even know about it. Every year there's rainfall and flooding like this.
Nearly 1 million Rohingya live here in Cox's Bazar. Their houses are precarious structures, held together by bamboo sticks and plastic sheets. When the strong currents came, they were swept away.
The landslide fully damaged my house. Somehow my family members could evacuate. The mud that came down from the hill entered my home and it was totally covered with mud. All of our belongings inside are covered in mud. There were very few things I could retrieve.
The United Nations says 4,000 shelters have been damaged. And the worst part is, the trouble isn't over. The monsoons are getting more erratic every year. Combined with Bangladesh's woeful drainage, such floods are likely to become a recurring phenomenon. South Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
Now, Kashmir is known for its 2 famous teas. One is the salty pink tea called noon chai, while the other is the kawa, the most famous tea of the region. But do you know what goes best with these hot beverages? The Kashmiri bread. There are 14 varieties of daily breakfast breads that the Valley's bakeries churn out every morning. And in our next story from Kashmir Connect, WION's correspondent Johan Castell visits one of those bakeries to take a look.
I'm not an early riser, but the residents of Kashmir clearly are. And as they say, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. I'm up before sunrise to visit a traditional bakery. These are hugely popular here. Everyone visits them to fetch bread for their morning tea. I've heard about many different types of bread that are baked in the valley, and this small local shop has got just what I'm looking for.
Almost every neighborhood in Kashmir has its own khandarbaz, a bakery. The local residents here have different breads for different times of the day. The most popular bread on offer in this khandarbaz is the girda, a soft yet crispy bread enjoyed with tea.
Look at the speed at which this khandur is churning out bread. People are picking up baskets of bread one after the other. I wonder which are the most popular breads.
Kashmiri roti girda. हाँ, उसके बाद लवासा और उसके बाद चचूरू. हाँ, उसके बाद कुलचा. उसके बाद बाजर खानी.
You don't make the bread with the harissa. Is that winter time only?
Winter time.
The harissa wala.
Harissa wala. हाँ.
Oh, you're selling also these ones? Where's your shop? Just here. These are really yummy, huh? Girda? You eat yourself with tea? Oh. You have for breakfast also?
No, I have just one bread and one tea.
With tea only? Oh. It's crispy and it's soft at the same time.
I love bread, and this gives me just another reason to love being here. I'm sure by the time my trip is over, I would have sampled all the breads that are made in Srinagar and gained more than a few pounds in the process. But hey, I'm not complaining.
Well, that's all we have time for on today's WION live broadcast from London. But for more global news and updates, stay tuned to WION. World is One.